Yeah. It was Sunday. It was hot. Right in the middle of afternoon scorch. The tipping point. Yeah, when there is no difference between the windows open or closed. The summer's tall sun had already baked dry the tattered clay facade bricks, acting like a heating blanket on the worst of summer's days. He sat down to write on a dishevelled wooden stool. It faced his only window, which looked straight out on the streets of Paris. He often was in continual conflict on whether or not his view served as inspiration or distraction, as it often split his attention with every noisy scooter or every quarrelling couple. If he were to write what he saw, it would be impossible to keep up. The humidity stuck on him like a musky old fur coat. The air carried an intense weight. He didn't much feel like writing today, but the words of the stoic Hemingway continued to ring in his ears, that he should write the truest sentence that he knew and do so daily if feasible. So he wrote what he saw, staring out his lonely little window over the Rue des Saules and Montmartre, just across from the Le Consulat. Yeah, he always hated telling other Parisians where he lived. It seemed too easy, so cliche. But addressing foreigners, it was different. To them, it was pure fantasy. And his home street rolled easier of his tongue. His chest was more proud, and his chin automatically higher. To be fair, though, they had no clue their love affair would end abruptly if they had to sleep in his lumpy single bed or listen to his possessed water pipes every time old Mrs. Boucher would flush after her 2 a.m. wee. He had already begun, after plenty of procrastination, forcing himself to put pen to paper. He wrote, it was hot. He wasn't quite sure if he stopped right then and there and followed it with a period, if that counted as a sentence. Regardless, it was true. It was hot, followed by a few descriptive words describing the heat and its intensity. Eventually, his attention turned from the heat to the people sitting in the heat. Who in their right mind would sit out in midday sun and drink a hot beverage? Parisians in their cafes, always a time and place to kill an hour, and they do it in style. But sometimes he wished they would just get over themselves, how they would look at a tourist all funny when they asked for a latte, as if they had no idea what you would possibly want. Sitting down in a cafe, you must mean cafe creme. Frivolous if you would have asked him, just get this poor side some milk with his coffee and stop making such a big deal of it. More like the Italians, they walk up to the bar, signaling the air to be served, and the tiniest of cups of coffee is served to them in less than a minute. And in a quicker fashion, it has already been down. A colorful array of pocket change is left, and they carry on their day. Necessary? Yes. Arrogant? Not in the slightest. On the contrary, an efficient, elevated standard of living without the pomp. But not here. There is an art to drinking a hot cup of joe, and you must sit. And if you were fortunate enough, you sit back to the cafe to look out at all the others who do not have the luxury of time at that very moment, which is all fun and dandy. But for him, on this day he didn't go out. He couldn't be bothered with leaving. He stuck with his Sangiovese's Puglia, something about those Italian reds. Regardless of price, they were usually darker and earthier than the other wines in his budget. Today, though, this one was a little sweet. He should have just went with a dry southern rosé, although he would never say that out loud in the company of his peers. They all drank scotch and rambled on and boasted of their accomplishments. However, he knew they all drank for the kick and found it obnoxious how they always had to ask what proof it was. He enjoyed something more subtle, something that changed in the bottle, the air that jumped into the bottle and started pulling apart the wine, rounding of the edges, making it more palatable. Leaving it too long, though, there would be nothing left. Its whole life force gone from within and lifted into the air. Such a fragile thing wine is, which is why it's never happy, being carted off across the globe. 100 different variables could lessen or increase the desirability of wine, which is why when you have the perfect wine at the perfect time in the perfect place, the odds are so insurmountable. This is what makes a good thing great. It's true much of that can be said about whiskey, but he didn't have the stomach for it. The idea started to flow, the letters into words, words into sentences piling up on one another. It seems so long ago, him struggling to find just one honest sentence. This Hemingway is genius, he thought to himself, just write one true sentence. Forget about the spelling, leave the editing to the washed up wannabes, and just write. And write he did. He wouldn't know until tomorrow if it was worth keep.